Of what's making the headlines in the papers this morning, let's bring in a RISE analyst, Dr. Constance Ikwoku. Good morning, Dr. Constance.
Good morning, Yolanda.
Nice and white.
Good morning. Good morning, Adesua and Vimbai.
Good morning, Doc.
Good morning.
In the spirit of Adire, I love it. I love it.
How are you guys doing? Adesua, it looks like you just woke up from sleep. What happened?
That's the way in which it sounds.
You know, I've been battling a flu, but we're good. We're ready to be back.
Okay. Sorry about that. And just before we came on air, Yolanda was like, finish up, Winger. Finish up, Winger. I'm like, please, don't make me to be mean.
You're setting me up.
I'm not mean, Yolanda, okay?
Absolutely, Dr. Constance.
Okay, anyways, good to see everyone, and it's Friday again. Okay, let's go to the papers this morning. Hello there, and welcome to the program. We begin with This Day. In This Day newspaper, we see that even as the world shifts focus to cleaner energy, it is glaring that fossil fuels will remain a considerable source, and drilling may continue until the wheels fall off, so to speak. Here, Lokpobiri oil sector divestments added 200,000 barrels per day to Nigeria's crude output. The big dogs in this industry, Shell, ExxonMobil, Total Energies, ENI, are all reducing or selling their onshore and shallow water oil and gas assets. But they're not quitting the country. Instead, they're moving to deep water operations, unlocking $5.5 billion in final investment decisions. We also know that crude oil production has increased between October last year from 1.7 million to 1.83 million barrels per day. Not to mention that the number of active drilling rigs has grown from 31 in January to 50 by July this year. We add the fact that the government is trying to return to Ogoni land. Vimbai, what does this all mean for Nigeria?
Goodness me, it means a lot, and it's good to see that Nigeria put out such a strong outing at the Africa Energy Week that was held in Cape Town over the past few days, where of course the biggest players in the African energy scene converged. Nigeria, of course, being one of those biggest players and being able to show up with positive news this year. So of course we know the reports that have been shared with regards to the increase in our daily oil output. As much as they're sharing the numbers of 1.73 to 1.8 million, we know that that includes condensate. So once you remove condensate, you're looking at numbers around 1.6 million barrels per day. Nevertheless, that divestment from the IOCs that looked like doom and gloom, in essence, is translating into a bit of a positive development with an increase in 200,000 barrels per day. So what does this tell us? This tells us that, number one, it seems that our local players are actually better suited for our local terrain. We know that there have been issues around pipeline vandalism. We know that there are issues around community engagement. And of course, we also know that there's issues of needing to update some of the technology that is being used on the oil rigs. So when you look at the new players who are Nigerian, who understand the terrain, understand the communities coming in, this is a very positive development. And a part of what was highlighted in the conversation is that it's also now time for us to unlock local African investment as well, to be able to power African players also getting involved in a scene that was largely dominated by the international oil companies before. Now, I think that we should also take some of the positives from some of Donald Trump's current policy shifts that we're seeing, which is, for example, number one, he's saying drill, baby, drill. And he's saying that, fossil fuels are not bad. This is good news for us here because we know that we're still highly dependent on our oil and gas resources. We know that our energy security is dependent on oil and gas, and our economic and fiscal security as well. So if we are part of a conversation that says that the world needs to shift away from this narrative where we want to totally discard a single resource and talk more about the diversification of the energy basket, then that puts Nigeria in a very positive position. However, we now need to see how we'll balance that with the effect and impact of climate change. And of course, we know that a lot of those emissions are not even coming from us. They're coming from other countries, but they impact us at at the worst level. So overall, I think a great outing for Nigeria. I believe one of the statements shared there as well was that Nigeria is open for business. We're also seeing some positive impacts of the PIA 2021 because we're seeing that there's more transparency. We still have a long way to go. I say this, with sort of with a cautious optimism, because we know that there's still a long way to go with regards to total transparency in the oil and gas sector. However, we are not where we were pre-2021, and this government has shown a commitment to this Petroleum Industry Act. Now, what do we do with players in the space? For example, right now we're having issues with unions, because as much as the unions are accusing a player like Dangote of being a monopolist, we also realize that Nigeria is facing a monopoly of unionism. And this, at the moment, is pretending to be a very massive challenge to the sector. We know that the Pengassan strike that has just been put on hold, they said it's not over, it's just suspended. We lost almost 16% of our daily oil output, 30% of our gas output, just in the short days that strike took place. So still many factors that need to be addressed. However, I think, on days like this, it's a Friday, let's just celebrate the wins and acknowledge the fact that, yes, our daily oil output has increased and the potential looks positive.
Minister Lokpobiri there, asking African countries to collaborate more to make sure that they unlock more investments in this sector. Still in these days and stepping into politics, there are no constitutional breaches by Damagu, PDP replies Anyanwu. Insists National Convention will go on as planned. Acting National Chairman Elia Damagu and National Secretary of the People's Democratic Party locked in a fresh rift over party rules, provisions and constitution. Anyanwu seems to claim here that there are infractions on his responsibilities, which is unacceptable to him, and believes that this is meant to undermine him. Damagu and National Publicity Secretary think or argue otherwise. Again, what we're seeing is the end result of different factions with different agendas within the party fighting to have the upper hand. Benga.
I think the crack is widening, unfortunately, for the leading opposition party, PDP. We've had overlapping crises. First, it was factional crisis, and now it's getting much more complicated. We thought it was just going to be Seyi Makinde-Wike rivalry, but now we're even seeing that the leadership at the top, the National Working Committee, is largely deeply divided, and this is unfortunate, coming just barely a month to the convention. You recall that Wike made 6 points demand, and which there is still a lot of uncertainty over in that. That's recognition of the South-South Zonal Congress, the reconduction of the Ekiti, and some other states like Anambra, and many of these states, and also they're regulating the powers of and also the issue of the adoption of a particular zone for the leadership of the party, which was like a direct confrontation to Damagun-led leadership of the party. So when you look at all these complications, there's so much clear uncertainty about the November 15th National Convention for the party. So, and now we also have people, they are also uncertain about people that would also run for the party's presidential candidate. They are not even sure of the posture, the status of whether of their membership. So when you look at all these things, I think the PDP really needs to, they need to come together to find a political solution, because the presence of the disruptive influence of Wike, who interestingly had laid a much more concise and articulate demand, which is according to the law, but because what he is saying is that they should recognize what the court had adopted, what the court has pronounced. So he has some legal grounds to some of his claims, albeit some of his disruptive influence. So when you look at all this, now the national chairman and the secretary that are supposed to work together to form the nucleus of the party, to move the party forward, are now at loggerheads. And I think a reconciliation does not seem to be coming anytime soon.
Oh, okay.
So this is very disturbing for a leading opposition party like
right,
the PDP.
let's see whether that convention holds. There is a lot of challenge to it. Finally, in this day newspaper, capital market operators seek review of proposed 30% capital gains tax to 25%. Mukuru now law lacks equity, or new law lacks equity. This new tax law which has been passed, or new tax bill which has been passed into law, specifically, and very speedily, is now raising dust, or has been raising dust after the fact. I believe we will see more of this as people gradually realize what this means for their pocket and their business. Do you think this opposition by capital market operators will go anywhere at this way, especially because the bill is now law? This should have happened before now.
Yeah, so what we're seeing happen here is that obviously we did have a very public process when our tax laws were coming together, but post that they've also had a consolidation of different laws which are now giving us these final numbers that people are now seeing, as you said, the realities of the bills that they will have to pay come the 1st of January 2026. Now these kind of burdens that are facing Nigerian people, because if we look at the capital markets, that really affects the upper echelon of society, but it also does have runoff effects if our equities are that expensive. But of course, the writer there also tells us just how much in billions that have been made over the past years from the same capital markets. But in terms of this push, how successful will their push be? It depends on how close they are to the political elite. And we know the moneyed elite and the political elite in Nigeria go hand in hand. But as you said, come January 1st, 2026, I think we're going to see some very interesting things happen. And we have to take this in context of what's going on around the world. I know it's foreign to the Nigerian mind to imagine that Madagascar's president had to dissolve his government because they had electricity shortages. In Nigeria, we're used to that. They had water shortages. Most people are pumping their own boreholes. And this is where tax comes in. These public services that are not necessarily offered to us by our government is usually where you see your tax money going. So when your tax burden is increasing, but you do not see the outcomes of this tax, when you don't see the improved services, improved roads, improved electricity, improved water, improved health outcomes, improved security, if you don't see that, but your tax burden keeps increasing, the bills you're paying to the government keep increasing, and you find that there's no way to hold them to account, or you don't see what they're actually using that money for, or worse than that, you actually do see what they're using that money for, because I'm sure we'll talk about the budget soon. When you see what the money is going towards, then there will definitely be pushback to these tax bills coming from the federal government.
There will be a lot of shock in January next year, I think, by the time you see what this means for your pocket. Let's move out from this day and go to other papers. We'll have to be very quick. Daily Independent this morning: service outage may persist at telcos suffer over 100,000 fiber cuts. This number of cuts was recorded in the last 2 years, which is disrupting services, affecting digital transformation goals, and leading to economic losses. In 2023 alone, telcos, that is telecommunication companies, lost 35.4 billion naira to this problem. In October this year, MTN reported 5,400 fiber optic cable cuts between January and July. All this from vandalism and road construction. I mean, this problem has been with us for a while, and we can see how it affects service delivery. Perhaps telcos will need to do more investment in alternative routes, backup technologies, advanced monitoring systems, to quickly detect and address these breaches. Vimbai, please come in here and very quick.
Very quickly, I think it's concerning that number one, the causes are infrastructure development and vandalism, because the telco networks themselves, the fiber cables, are a form of infrastructure development that we've worked very hard to invest in and to scale up, and we're nowhere near the connectivity numbers that we aspire to meet. So to know that while one industry is pushing forward, a different part of the economic space, or the development space, is cancelling out the work of the other is very unfortunate. But it also goes to show you that there's a huge lack in sort of our engineering mapping and our planning, because they're supposed to be detailed maps that show us where all the lines intersect, where the lines exist. So if road construction is now hampering on this, then it shows you that somewhere along the line there's a disconnect between our ambitious goals and preserving what we already have in existence. Now, on vandalism, of course, still speaks to an issue that continues. Earlier I spoke about oil, and we spoke about pipeline vandalism. You look at the fibers being vandalized. We hear about our electricity lines being vandalized as well. So there's intrinsic weakness, systemic weakness that we have, and this is something that affects every single one of us, because we do know when we experience the poor networks and so forth, and these telcos have come a long way. If you remember how hard they had to fight to be able to increase their tariffs, and that process was stalled for a long time, and their argument was that majority of their inputs are imported. The biggest part of their budgets are in foreign currency. So to know that they got a marginal win on the tariff increase, and they're still trying to run cell phone towers with generators and still trying to replace fiber that has been cut through importing, you realize that the telco sector, which we used to know as a money printing machine, is going through a very hard time. And I think it's a sector that needs to be prioritized. I know the NCC just got an appointment of a new chairman under Idris Olorumibe. So I'd be interested to see what direction he takes, because there's a disconnect with regards to what we're seeing from the telcos and their ability to deliver efficient service to us, the consumers.
Right. Yolanda, let me bring you into the story and leadership. Here, North Central Commission's 140 billion naira 2025 takeoff budget. Senate approval includes 10 billion naira for cars, travels 9 billion naira, phone calls 1.2 billion naira. Another over 2 billion was allocated to refreshments and meals for committees. These are being criticized as excessive for non-essential items, especially since it's 3 months to the end of the year. First of all, all the regions in the country now have a development commission, and this was set up to address long-standing grievances of neglect, underdevelopment, marginalization, and the aim was to channel these resources and focus interventions in critical areas. But as we already know, this will not automatically translate to development or become successful if these commissions are manned, staffed, and managed the typical way that we do in government. And that's why we already see criticisms, poking this budget and asking questions about expenditure. Go, Yolanda, please.
I believe that if everything was working out well and we were in a functioning system, then this would be taken in a much lighter way. Unfortunately, because there's so many systemic problems and issues and economic breakdowns, people will definitely find this pill very difficult to swallow. There's a lot of talk about budget prioritization, which is a very valid point. Is this the right time for this type of allocation to be made? As you rightly said, we're 3 months to the end of the year. And, scrutiny of like asset procurements. Do we need more vehicles? This is a conversation that we have been having over and over again. And I believe that until it is resolved, it will always and continue to be a soft spot, which is, very sensitive for many Nigerians. What are all of these funds being used for? 10 billion for cars. There was an issue, I believe, some months ago where we had a report where there was a similar report that was talking about justification for an allocation for vehicles. this is not really the right time for this type of conversation. And I
Right.
believe that until things are corrected, it will always be something that is difficult to discuss.
Again, that question of, do we have a revenue problem in Nigeria, or do we have an expenditure problem? How do
good
we
questions.
manage our funds? Are we prudent? You know, again, taxation, we talked about it earlier. If you're taxing people more, you better be sure that you're managing those resources. But so let's move to New Telegraph. Uncertainty over legal framework can hinder the electoral process, according to INEC. Says review report contains 142 recommendations for electoral reform. That's a lot. The fears raised here is in regard to the delay by the National Assembly to amend the Electoral Act. The Independent National Electoral Commission Chairman, Professor Mahmoud Yacoub, is calling on the National Assembly to speed up action on this. Out of 30 recommendations in 2019 from the European Union Election Observer Mission, 11 have been addressed. So in this report, the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Honorable Abbas Tajuddin, says President Tinubu and the National Assembly want to see a better, more transparent elections in 2027. Wenga, do you believe this? I don't know. In light of all the desperate moves going on, you know, almost untwisting governors to join the ruling party, I don't know. What's your perspective?
Actually, with a defective legal framework and a very disturbing judicial system, it calls for concern, actually, because when you look at the number of recommendations, I think this is something that borders on the INEC, the executive, the media, even the civil society. Out of about 23 recommendations from the European Union, I think 8 is being addressed.
11 have been addressed.
The INEC is taken up. Okay, well, I think the figures vary, but I think that there are about 5 priority areas. I think INEC is yet to address one.
Yes.
But the one that borders on the executive, the legislature, and even the civil society, they are still on. Take, for instance, now, the process of appointing the INEC chairman. This borders on the INEC autonomy, which is very, very disturbing. So if there is no autonomy, political autonomy, executive autonomy, and fiscal autonomy, in a situation where the INEC chairman is still running cap in hands to the president to seek for approval for funds and things like that, it's an aberration to the electoral process. And when you also look at section 285 subsection 5 and 6 that stipulates the number of days, the number of time limit for a petitioner to file in his petition, which is just 21 days. It's barely enough for you to consult your lawyers, get all the facts on the ground. And the one that is even more disturbing is even the need to conclude all electoral petitions before being sworn, before the candidate is being sworn in. Because if the candidate is sworn in, then he usurps the instrument of government to perpetuate, to ensure he wins every court cases against him. So when you look at all those systemic defects, and there is also need to empower INEC to have prosecutorial powers. So without all those ones, without all,
maybe that's a stretch.
Yes, because if all these things are missing, then we will still continue to. Then, most importantly, I just want to just calm down. Most importantly,
quickly,
the
so that
need to also create the implementation framework, like the electronic transmission, like the electronic transmission of results. Now, the IRF portal is still in doubt. So even when the INEC makes their recommendation, and the process of legislative amendment also takes time, and so everything falls like a race against time now. And it's shrouding a lot of cloud on the possibility of having a credible election.
All right, and that's why you wanted to come in.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I do. Because I did disagree a little bit. 21 days is not a short period of time to present your petition, because, again, we want these petitions and these cases to be done as soon as possible. Ultimately, it's the people's mandate that is in question here. But another thing is that INEC is pressing upon the National Assembly to act. And the National Assembly, of course, has been on holiday since July 23rd. They have not sat. They're expected to resume on Tuesday, but they've had, I think, a longer summer holiday than most people as children. So when we're thinking, you know, when we're thinking about the National Assembly, the effectiveness and how seriously they're going to take some of these things, because they have a lot of things on their desk right now, not only electoral reform, but also constitutional reform as a whole is a serious agenda for the National Assembly in the latter quarter of this year. So time is really going, but we're going to see how active they're going to be. And when we're looking at the National Assembly doing oversight for organizations like INEC and working on legislation, we also have to think about possibly the lack of oversight in these budgets that we've been talking about. Because honestly, these budgets, anybody, and I ask any Nigerian, take out your laptop, look at your state budget, look at the budget of any ministry, and you see how much they're spending on newspapers, you see how much they're spending on refreshment, and I think that would be actually enough to start a movement in Nigeria.
Yeah, but let me just quickly take you up on this issue of 21 days.
Just before you pick up on that, I want to just round up on this point around budgets before Benga goes back to electoral reform, because I think it's also important to put things in perspective.
Yes.
The North Central Development Commission was created in February of 2025. It is a new developmental commission, so the establishment costs would be higher. But if you look at it from sort of an economic analytic perspective, they say that your capital expenditure should be 60% minimum and your recurrent should be 40% minimum. The NCDC are actually putting 100 billion into capital expenditure and 40 billion into recurrent expenditure, which means that they're actually spending about 70% above the required limit on capital expenditure. Now, we need to remember that there's Benue State, there's Niger State, there's Kwara State, there's states that are ravaged, that have been destroyed with floods, that have been destroyed with insecurity and so forth. So I think it's also important to look at the other side of it and say, this region does need this level of support, but now how accountable are we going to hold them for how they spend every naira and kobo? Benga, you have the floor. You want to go
I just want to quickly review the last petition process, the presidential election petition. The allegations, the petitions were thrown out mostly because it was lacking in evidence. And why was it so? They got more evidence after the expiration of the 21 days, but it couldn't be counted upon because the time limit had expired. So that is why many legal practitioners, many election observers were clamoring for more time, for expansion of the time limit beyond 21 days, so that they could have more time to gather enough evidence in filing this petition. So I think that is the reason people are clamoring for an expansion of dates in terms of the 21-day limit, and also the need to conclude all the electoral petition before the inauguration or swearing in of the candidates.
Absolutely, there is something to be said about that. I think we've exhausted that topic. Let's move on to Daily Sun. Here, Daily Sun is reporting that Lassa fever has claimed 166 lives. Ondo, Bauchi, Edo, Taraba, and Ebonyi are most hit. And Abuja at 50, Wike rolls out citywide street light project to tackle crime in FCT. It's been reported that almost 80% of the city is in darkness, and crime is often linked to poor illumination. The new street light will have advanced surveillance technology to detect vandalism and theft, and offenders can be quickly identified. All sounds high-tech, but this should be basic infrastructure in a capital city, especially one that is still being developed. We know when you look at Abuja, you will see that by the time it's fully developed, there will be so much population here in the city. But residents of Abuja, we can all confirm that it is difficult, as at now, to drive in many areas because there's pitch darkness at night. Especially. Yolanda, I think you were itching to say something.
Yes, I was. Yes. Dr. Constance, Abuja has some of the nicest cars I have ever seen. Some of the most modern
Is that
vehicles.
coming from Zimbabwe?
Come on, Dr. Constance.
Yeah,
I mean, no, sincerely speaking, we have some of the most modern cars, like the newest on the line.
True.
And yet, we have such basic issues. How can we be having, you know, no street lights on the roads? It's not a good look for the city and for the country as a whole.
There are street lights in many places, but they're not on. They're not working, or they're not on at all.
Exactly
at night,
my point.
Yes.
I think even a few months ago, we took a report where, you know, people had been going haywire about how this is such an issue in the city and how it's dangerous, and it's harboring, you know, a lot of criminality and, you know, on these dark streets. So it's pretty unfortunate that we have that. And in a country that boasts of so many people and so much culture, and people are always encouraged to come to Nigeria and look at what we have to show for it. It's really sad that after all this time we're still grappling with such a basic issue such as street lights in the city. To touch as well on the other headline that you mentioned about Lassa fever, this is another issue that the country has been grappling with as well, because we have had so many Lassa fever outbreaks. And you know, Lassa fever basically comes from rats, and they, you know, when human beings come in contact with the feces or the urine of rats, and then, you know, finds its way into the human body. It's so unfortunate that we are having such backward issues, things that are not supposed to be a problem for a country that is supposed to be so technologically advanced in so many different ways. You know, what are the public health strategies in place? We cannot continually be having this year on year. I think last year alone, there was about 1,300 confirmed cases of Lassa fever with over 200 deaths. So it's quite unfortunate that we're having all of these basic issues in a country that's supposed to be moving forward with the times and just keeping up with modernity.
Yeah, just to say more on the street light project in Abuja, which I think is critical because I have been living in Abuja for quite a while. You would see that many years ago, I think as far back as 2009, when I came to Abuja, 2010, the city was quite safe. Very, very safe. You could go out at any time of the night. But gradually, when we had that crisis with Boko Haram nationwide, and you had a lot of IDPs being moved to Abuja, you began to see a change. And I remember that one night,
I believe you did a report on that.
Yes. And I remember that one night I was driving and I got to a traffic light and stopped, and someone came from, you know, from somewhere and tried to open my car. Luckily, it was locked. He opened it and found out that it was locked, and then he ran away. And so that was when I realized that things are changing. And because it was also very dark, you know, we have a lot of trees on the streets in Abuja on both sides. So someone can just hide there and jump out from there. Yes.
You know, I really appreciate you bringing up this story of what happened to you, because this has happened to many people I know in Abuja. I was recently telling someone that I've lived in Abuja less than 1 year. I know 2 women who have been killed. This is something that I never imagined could be a reality. And you know, I think it's important for us to speak about these things, because yesterday the Minister of the FCT, Nyesom Wike, was at a project about this, about lighting up the streets. And he was talking about the project he was working on, but he also used it to mock the Senate, in particular Senator Ali Ndume, who he said, I know there is no light where you are living, but to go home and next time when we ask for 1 naira in the budget, you'll give us 5 because you know we'll utilize it well. And a lot of people were laughing, and it's, you know, been on social media, but I don't think these things are funny at all.
No.
You know, we're talking about people's lives and livelihoods. We're talking about the budget and how it's utilized. I think oftentimes the people in our political class see it as politicking, as jokes, as banter amongst themselves, as something to make light of. But street lights are very important, as you said. We've seen people, you know, I know someone whose sister was stabbed. I know someone who's been a victim of crime, all in Abuja very recently. And so these things are not funny. When we're building roads and we're dancing at these flag-off events, and then the roads have no lights, we have to question ourselves if we're really serious people, and if the people leading us themselves too are very serious about the sanctity of our lives and our livelihoods.
And they talk about solar lights. I say a lot of them will be solar light. We do have some street lights before, so I wonder whether the ones we had before will be functioning as well.
And it's okay.
All right. You wanted to say something quickly before
I wanted
we go
to say that it's very much more disturbing when you hear revelations coming from the FCT minister that the budget for the FCT was just passed this July. So it leaves a lot of economic uncertainty, which has a lot of spiraling effect on the life of the people. Because if the budget is just being passed, it has even security implications. How do you expect the person in charge to function? Now we have on reports that we are running on about 3 parallel budgets, and yet the Senate has not come out to explain where we stand regarding the nation's fiscal status. So when you juxtapose all this together, it's very, very disturbing, because when you assess someone like Minister Wike, in all fairness to him, is a very performing minister. He's one of last year he won the This Day Arise award of the best minister in the country. But when he's been crippled without financial backing, there is a limit to what he can do, because the absence of street lights in a beautiful city like Abuja is a clear aberration to what an FCT should be, and it has a clear implication on the safety of lives and property. Just recently, we talked about the lives. We can't continue to shed crocodile tears. We need to ensure that institutions take responsibility for their for what they are set up to do.
All right, with much said on that topic, let's move to the international headlines. Here, Daily Graphic, 75 years of truth. Daily Graphic, the nation's trusted voice. This Ghanaian daily is celebrating 75 years in circulation. Congrats to them. The Citizen newspaper, as his hidden sex trade, it is estimated that there must be more than 100,000 girls across South Africa in multiple platforms selling some kind of sex content, this report says. Then the biggest story coming out of the UK is a terror attack on a synagogue yesterday. Daily Mirror screams terror at the synagogue. 2 die as fears of more anti-Jewish violence grows. Moving on to Daily Mail, he was an Islamist terrorist, this headline says. The Times newspaper, terror on Yom Kippur, which is the holiest day in Judaism. You know, you can imagine that this happened on the day that they were, celebrating their holiday, and it was a big blow to the Jewish community in the United Kingdom. The Daily Telegraph, Israel blames Tama after synagogue terror rampage. This incident happened in Manchester. Yolanda, sentiments inflamed currently in the UK.
And rightly so. A large number of Jews worldwide were attending what you rightly stated as Yom Kippur, the most sacred day in the Jewish calendar. Now, it's really unfortunate, the facts that we have are that the man was 35 years old and he was British Syrian. So a lot of people are kind of using that to push the, anti-Islamic agenda there. And he was believed to have been shot down by police. Just as mentioned as well, 2 people were killed and 3 more were injured. And Keir Starmer is definitely under fire as he had to rush back into the UK from where he was to kind of address the issue and have more meetings. Part of what I read on the report was that eyewitnesses say that this man had things that were strapped to his chest. What they didn't know was whether these were explosive devices or if these were just decoys. The latest update that I've heard from that so far is that the police had declared what they call Operation Plateau, which is just basically a set of responses that are put in place when such incidents come about, which basically it's just like the standard operational procedure for large incidents of what seems to be a terror attack. It's very unfortunate what has happened. I'm sure the Jewish communities all around the world have this hit very hard, because this is a special day in their Jewish calendar, and you know, the perpetrator has, you know, been killed. He was shot dead.
Yes.
But these type of incidents keep reoccurring around the world, especially in the West.
All right.
So one can only wonder what the future has to hold. We've had mosque attacks in Australia. We've had several types of these terrorist attacks, and what is actually fueling this in these nations?
Of course, we've also seen the rise of tensions in the UK and all across the world because of that Gaza-Israel war. People are connecting this, you know, saying that what Israel is doing in Gaza is causing outrage around the world, and it is actually not good for the Jewish people that are, you know, spread across the entire world. All right, we'll have to leave it there. Those were your headlines today.